Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and today we're talking about Marauders, number 12. So, we've been reviewing the last couple of Marauders issues, but I was really excited with the previous book. Actually, I guess the last book was the first one I reviewed live, now that I think about it. But we are following right up on that, and for those unaware, Kitty Pryde is back from the dead, which is, relatively speaking, a big deal for Krakoa because they had tried many times to resurrect her and finally found a way to succeed. She was killed by Sebastian Shaw, so a lot of this book is kind of reconciling with that. And overall, it's a very light on action book. If I don't think there's any real action, so to speak. A lot of it is just talking and doing things. But I love it. It gets right into line with what I think we were talking about in the previous issue, if I'm remembering correctly, where I was saying that not every X-Men book has to be crammed full of action. This one truly wasn't, and was all the stronger for it. It also has some pretty important moments, especially for the overall history of Kitty Pryde's character. And I, as a fan of Kitty Pryde, love this book for that reason, but think it's kind of a little memorable and significant because of that too. So on the whole, it's an easy recommend. The artists do a great job of it on the whole in terms of just putting together a nice looking book. You need a lot of facial expressions to really convey and work with a book that is normally pretty action heavy, lacking really any action. And they do that. Jerry Duggan, once again, just has a great sense of these characters and this atmosphere of Krakoa. Matteo Lolli does the artwork, Edgar Delgado does the coloring, and Corey Petit did the lettering. They all really put together a fine book overall. So let's talk a little bit about what it's about. We open on Kitty Pryde surrounded by all of these mutants that she helped to bring home to Krakoa and shepherd as a marauder, all celebrating her return. There's a wonderful little celebration. Kitty and Emma Frost even get to ride on horses and talk a little bit about Shaw. They kind of communicate to each other what they want to do about it, but we don't get a particular insight into it, though it delights Emma Frost. And then there's a big party celebrating Kitty's return. Kurt follows up a little bit on what happened in issue number 11, where he seems to recognize the significance of the number of times it took to resurrect Kitty Pryde as having some sort of importance. And apparently he was off thinking about that, but he's there to celebrate Kitty Pryde, and he returns her little Jewish star necklace. And then there's a nice little moment where she gets reunited with Magic and even shares a drink with Shaw. Clearly, her and Emma are biding their time. Magic, at Kate Pryde's request, teleports her off to a tattoo parlor. And Kate gets these knuckle tattoos with the message "Kill Shaw." That's on the thumbnail and cover of this particular book. And then kisses the female tattoo artist. Basically, for the first time, confirming that Kitty Pryde is indeed bisexual, although realistic. Yes, it is JX3. Thanks for joining us. Realistically, this has been hinted since the Chris Claremont days, and heavily hinted these days in Krakoa, if not outright confirmed up until this moment. But here, there's simply no question of it anymore. And that's all really fun. Like I said, this has been her character since the beginning, but we're well past the age of Chris Claremont only really being able to vaguely tease that sort of thing, although I'm almost positive he has since confirmed that is what he was going for. And that's been so heavily hinted since the Whedon days at this point that it really doesn't feel like a huge moment, but it's nice that it's confirmed and opens up a lot of possibilities going forward. I'm curious what's going to happen next with regards to Shaw. I think well, I don't know what they have planned exactly, but inevitably he's going to end up underground, right? And Kate's return also seems very like all of these Path to X of Swords Marauders books have just been dealing with Kitty Pryde's return, so I assume she's going to play a big part in that stuff going forward as well. As is Shaw. I wonder if he's going to defect to the opposing sides of Xeno, the Russians, and whoever else is joining up with that weird coalition that seems to be stacking up against Krakoa. JX3 is saying, is that shocking anymore these days? I don't think it's shocking, but I think it's appropriate for a character like Kitty Pryde, where that's basically just been text up until now, anyways. So, no, it's not shocking. But I do think it's, a nice moment overall and a nice little bit of artwork. I don't think anything in this book really is much of a twist, other than just the vividness of certain scenes. Like the last image we get is of her with the knuckle tats, and it's pretty striking. As is a moment when Kate gets the telepathic flash of Lockheed drowning and Shaw just casually drinking from the boat, having attempted to murder the two of them, and then he just plays it cool at the reunion for Krakoa. Kind of, I'm guessing, hoping that she doesn't remember the circumstances of her death, though obviously that's long been out at this point. Shaw's kind of, I don't know, it was a dumb move of him, but it's consistent with his character that he would go for that evil, and they were wrong to trust him, I guess. He could have played it smart or just worked with the Krakoans the way Apocalypse seems to these days, but whatever. I think that's fine. And I think it's right for Kate's character overall. She's definitely kind of taking charge, and this really is her book. I'm happy to see her back. Very curious to see where they're going with all of this. And it'd be nice for her to just sort of have an open sort of relationship with Emma Frost. That seems to be the overall direction of all of that, like, interpersonal stuff, which I'm all for. So, yeah, I think we'll leave it at that. It's a pretty short review, but really everything else I have to say about Marauders goes from the last issue, too. I really like the artwork and the striking colors. I think this is one of the more bold, interesting, and unpredictable sort of books these days. JX, you were saying, like, is it shocking? I don't know if it's shocking, but I definitely don't know where this series, out of all the X-Men lines, are going these days, because it's all been about what's going on with Kate Pryde. And I don't know what's going on with Kate. And now she's back without really any extra well, there's more details, but we don't really know anything more in terms of what's going on. Just more of a mystery. JX, you're also asking a good question. Would you suggest this to a new comic book reader, the series that is? I think when it comes to this stuff, for a new comic book reader, really no matter where you go, the best way to start is House of X Powers of 10. That's a collected graphic novel, either digitally or physically at this point. That's the jumping on point for X-Men these days. It really is the best way to get context for all of this stuff, at which point all of the series are fair game. Marauders is a great one. After that, the core X-Men series sets up a lot of stuff. Wolverine's good. A lot of the issues we're kind of picking up on an ongoing basis these days are pretty good. X-Factor, I think, is a great jumping on point. But again, it really only works after House of X Powers of 10. I've used that as a gift for other people and stuff, if that's what you're asking about, JX. Or if you're looking for a jumping on point, it really is there. But then the cool thing is, like I was saying after that, it really doesn't matter what series comes out when. No matter what, you'll get it, because you'll know the basics of Krakoa, and everything else you'll kind of fill in over time as you read different series. That's what I've personally found, and I'm sure that reflects most other readers. Now, that being said, not everyone else is as game for Hickman's X-Men. Bad Mr. Box has left some thoughtful comments in chat and in comments, like in the comment section of videos posted after the fact. And he makes some good point, and other people have too. I recently read his uh, relatively long comment on uh, one of the recent books we did. I'm losing track at this point, but and it kind of I guess depends. I guess it really I think it's a very Hickman-y line. All the X-Men books and the overall atmosphere of what he's going for. And what I mean by that is it's very in line with like what he did with Fantastic Four, the Avengers, Secret Wars. If you like that sort of technology heavy, or in this case biotech heavy, sci-fi-ish, imaginative, like almost philosophical kind of content, but also not. I don't know. It's a weird mix. I've never really read a Hickman book I don't like. I mean, individually I have. Like, we've done the giant size X-Men books, and some of them haven't been great by Hickman. But broadly speaking, all of those movements I just described, or beyond Marvel, like East of West, I like. I like his take on storytelling and that sort of thing. So it really depends. I wouldn't keep forcing the issue if you've shown someone a Hickman book and they don't really like it. I don't really think they're going to change between different franchises. But I like them. I think they're interesting. I think they challenge what people might expect out of comic book storytelling, especially stuff like Time Runs Out, but even, you know, House of X, Powers of 10. I like it. I think it's bold and different than the every other superhero run out there, because we're like, oh well, death doesn't matter anymore. So what does matter now? And that's the kind of the question of this entire collective X-Men run. And I like that question. So I'm a big fan of it. And I say that just because I find the people that disagree with me on any given book, whether I like it or not, tend to be the more vocal ones. And because I so consistently like the X-Men, and we're starting to talk about these books a little more these days, like I got another X-Men book after this one to talk about from last week still. Um, I think it's worth kind of exploring the other side of that opinion and whether or not people like this sort of thing. I have a hard time really grasping it, though. I will say that. You guys make good points about why you don't like it, and there's definitely interesting elements of dissent to be made, but I guess the context matters too, because like we say, or like I guess I say, like compared to what, because then we have to kind of have honest questions about the Claremont era and stuff like that, and I think I get a lot of pushback on that, or even Grant Morrison's take on the X-Men, but I don't have as much nostalgia for those series for one thing, and tend to look at those a little realistically, which is there's a lot of reverence I have for them, even like the Stan Lee era and stuff, but I don't think that's the end all and be all, and there's a lot of potential in these Hickman books. Josie Rags says this is the best X-Men since the cartoon in the 90s. Well, and people have a lot of comparisons and stuff. I just think it doesn't compare well to a lot of those things. So at the bare minimum, it's kind of equivalent, because it's trying to be so different and succeeding in a lot of ways. I like Hickman's vision of the future that we kind of see across a lot of his books. It's sexually open, optimistic. It has a lot of bright ideas and limitless possibility in under like the surface of what he's writing. And I struggle to find stuff to object to. And I guess what I'm saying is, like, when we compare it to something like my previous review on Superman by Bendis, it's hard for this to even be much of a meaningful contest. That's even true against some of the indie books that we reviewed recently. Pulp was fantastic, but Black Stars Above, that Seven Secrets stuff, that really doesn't strike me as much as some of these X-Men books do these days. JX saying, that doesn't matter, it's all about relationships, maybe between characters. Well, and see, that's kind of the hidden truth of a lot of superhero books to begin with. Doc Ock has come and gone a million times, but what's stuck is the long progression between him and Peter Parker at this point, where a good writer knows to like write a little bit of nuance between Ock and Spider-Man at this time, or at least they should, because there's so much history there, and nobody knows Peter as well as Doctor Octopus. And vice versa. They there should be something there, and you shouldn't just ignore like everything that's happened in Superior Spider-Man. But what people do ignore is the death surrounding that, previous deaths with that character, Peter's death. None of that stuff really sticks. So I think there's something more honest and open about Krakoa and X-Men that even the rest of Marvel kind of feels lacking in comparison because of that. JX is saying, but I like good guy, bad guy as an obstacle. Well, to be fair, just because some of the older and also heavily used X-Men villains like Magneto and Apocalypse, even Shaw, basically any evil mutant, has come on to the side of Krakoa. To contrast that, I think Hickman, Duggan, Percy, and Williams, like they all have done a great job at introducing a lot of villains to sort of make up for that. Because Zeno, over time, has won me over as being something relatively memorable and interesting. The Russian stuff is pretty cool, and I like that idea. I think it's politically appropriate for today's climate and is interesting. The horticulture is fun as hell. The Vampire Nation is interesting, and I'm curious if that ties into what Jason Aaron's doing with the vampires these days. I don't know. I don't know if those things are related, but they should be. There's a lot of interesting villains still out there. I'm sure I'm forgetting some. Those are just the recent ones that come to mind. I mean, Mojo's awesome and X Factor right now, too. I don't know if that's going to be an ongoing thing. I hope Mojo's just here for the fun now in X Factor, and that's all. We got enough cool things going on. Oh, and then there's that weird mind control lady. I think she's related to the Russians. She's been showing up in Wolverine's earlier books when he was dealing with that. Omega Red's still a villain. There's so many bad guys out there. And then there's like, I think there's also those Sentinel manufacturers out there somewhere. We haven't heard from them in a while either. So there's certainly no end to it. Cable's introducing those Axis Swords villains with the crazy swords and the crocodile dude. The good guy, bad guy dynamic's still going on. And the best part is, those villains, a lot of them, I understand where they're coming from, but are also deadly enemies that need to be taken seriously and also are like worthy adversaries. I think will be cathartic seeing some of them like getting taken down, or like it'll be tough seeing them get their victories. Zeno is not playing around. They got moves to make based on some recent events from X Factor that we just reviewed. So we can expect some pretty cool stuff out of Axis Swords, as we'll say. A lot of people seem to be using Axis Swords as a sort of marker for whether or not they want to continue with the X-Men. I think it'll answer some of the doubts. And to be fair, I have doubts too. There's been a lot of filler X-Men books along the way that truly feel like a waste of time, even now after them paying off some of those things. So X of Swords will be an answer for me too about whether or not they can pay this off. That was actually my initial concern with House of X and Powers of 10. I thought it was just going to kind of be I initially thought it was going to be a side universe, like alternate universe kind of thing. And obviously that's not the case. It ended up being like permanent, and the more that I've seen the X-Men crew over at Marvel consistently follow up on the ideas of House of X, the more I've been impressed by that story and the whole Krakoan climate of X-Men so far. We'll see where all that goes, but even if it tanks somehow, I've enjoyed the ride up until now quite a bit, on the whole. So, about 12 minutes ago, I was trying to wrap up, saying like, oh, we'll just leave it at a shorter review then, but you guys made some good points in chat there. So thanks, Josie and Jay, for joining me, if I correctly shortened your names. And we do have one more X-Men book to talk about, and then, yeah, I still got other stuff to pick up, but we're almost caught up, and we'll start to do some more reviews. And I do have I'm kind of doing a lot of groundwork for a series of videos. I think that'll be coming out, not live, and more of something that I've been really working on the last couple of weeks that I'm quite looking forward to talk about. So stay tuned for that. And we'll see you guys next time here on Comic Island.